piece was because I'd gone for months walking the dog, looking at this rusted storm drain cover, and I kept thinking someday I'm going to go and put some cotton on it and get a print. And in the meantime, I started hand dyeing different yarns. And then one day, there was supposed to be no storms, no wind, so I went out and put my cotton down, and I had a brick for each corner, and it needed more because, of course, there was wind. So I had bottles full of water and bricks holding this, and I poured my first vinegar water on it, expecting that it would drain down in the circle. And my surprise was that it flowed out. And after a couple of times, I fell in love with the lacy pattern from the flow. So I was going out 2 and 3 times a day with vinegar water to get my lacy pattern going. And this was out there for almost 2 weeks. And one day there's a knock on the door, and it was the person from the city of Clearwater saying, "We're checking storm drains. Are you the person who has the science project out there? And we just want to let you know we're going to move it." And of course, and they said, "Well, you can put it right back." But of course, you can't put it right back. So that was the end of my lacy rust. And then when I did the weaving on it, I realized, dummy, that it would have to be tied down. So every single intersection had to be tied down to the piece. It's times like that I think I'm crazy. This is one of my favorite pieces. Someone said, "I have a piece of silk from Uzbekistan. Would you like to try something with it?" And so I did a Rashi Shibori, and where the color goes on, you do the Shibori, and then afterwards you put it in black acid dye and then discharge it. So you can see the black from the black acid dye, and the brown is where the black acid dye was and then had been discharged to the brown. But the way the silk took the color is just so different than the Chinese silk that I've worked with. And one of my favorite pieces that many, many friends seem to like a lot, they keep saying, "Oh, you've got to put that in." This is my 3rd quilt. It is definitely an art quilt. And it was a piece of art cloth that I couldn't figure out what I wanted to do. I kept doing more and more layers on it because I wasn't happy with it. And a friend said, "Oh, why don't you cut it up and see what happens?" And the minute I cut it up, I fell in love with what I could do with it. And I counted, and one of those squares has 13 layers, but I can't remember which one. And this is my having fallen in love again 20 years later with stitch Shibori and experimenting with traditional stitches. And then this is another piece of Arashi Shibori that I had a strong image of what I wanted to get. And when I started to open it up and take it off the pole and unwrap it, it wasn't at all what I was planning. And I was so disappointed for about 10 seconds, and then I opened some more and said, "Yay, it looks like Florida." So this has become Florida. And this piece is a silkscreen piece, and it's called double screening, where you're blocking out, and then what has been blocked should then transfer the next time. Well, it didn't work perfectly, but I started there, and I'm changing the color, and you can see where this brown was held and then released in the next one. And so it's released, each one releases in the next one. I heard the musician, Paul Simon, being interviewed. I think he just joined the Gershwin Prize for Music. And the interviewer said, "How do you start writing a piece of music?" And he said, "Well, I think about an abstract rhythm pattern." And the interviewer said, "For a guitar or for a piano?" He said, "No, totally abstract, no instrument involved." And I don't know at what point his words started resonating, but I've always known that this happens to me, is somebody's words will trigger something in my mind and it gets me. So I'm madly trying to find a pencil and an envelope, something to start making notes and drawing. So as he's talking about his abstract rhythm patterns and the fact that after he does that, and he gets a pattern that he likes, well, then he shifts gears to think about the instrumentation. And then writing a song, the very last thing he does is the lyrics and the words. And he's talking about how a stray word here or there will trigger this response. And I'm sitting there saying, wow, that's the way my mind works. But mine doesn't produce any music. I always wish I could do music. So this was in my mind. Cindy, there you are. Cindy's a silk painter. This is essentially a silk painting, because what I did was I used resist lines and then put in the background 3 colors of the pink, the yellow, and the blue. Then I washed, these are water-soluble soy wax. So I washed the resist lines out, re-ironed, re-stretched the fabric, and started doing the different abstract patterns. Cool. And because I wanted, and I'm working really hard to get, parts of the one below coming, so you're seeing the background through the opening of the pattern of the resist. So I really fell in love with this, and in digging it out for this show, I still like this piece a lot, because it says a lot of the things about. At some point I realized that I've always been involved in color all my life, but I realized how much layering is part of it. And I think one of the first fabric layering pieces that I did was right about the time I finished college. I was at a fabric store and I found some cotton voile, which is just very sheer cotton, but it isn't soft like gauze. It has a certain body to it. And I did a hanging that was sort of interwoven, and it was hanging on a rod. It was 3 different colors and 3 different shapes, and they layered so you could see through. And that was a birthday present for my mother. So in thinking about writing my artist statement and talking about layering made me think back on that piece that I had done way, way back when. So layering and color are sort of the underlying things in a lot of the things I do. So when Convergence, which is the National Weavers Guild meeting, when Convergence came to Tampa Bay in 2008, I knew ahead about it because some people in the Surface Design Guild were helping on setting things up. And one of the people who was giving a talk and curating a show was someone I had taken a workshop years before. So I had all these great ideas I was going to do to show him, look what I've done. So I proceeded to walk the dog, fall, and break my hand, and shattered that joint in 4 places. So then I'm madly having ideas and trying to write left-handed, which I'm not, and make drawings left-handed, which didn't work. And so finally, so all of my ideas I couldn't do because for the show, because I'm sitting here with this mess. So the last part of the show was a yardage show, and they're saying, think Tampa, think sun, think sand, palm trees, sunshine. They didn't mention mosquitoes, but water, sand, and sun. And so I thought I just have time to get something finished, to get into that. So I did sunspots because I swim a lot of laps. You wouldn't believe it, but I am trying to lose weight. And I swim laps backstroke, and I get sunspots in my eyes. So I did this piece called Sunspots, which to me just epitomized Tampa Bay. We've got, except for this last week, we usually have sun. So I sent both of these pieces, long pieces, in, and I got this lovely letter back. We regret to inform you that your piece titled Sunspots was not accepted. And the second piece was so tight, I didn't even realize until I started to put it back in the envelope. There's a second piece of paper there. Yay! It said, we are happy to inform you that your piece titled Rhythm was accepted. So the piece that was fitting all of their parameters didn't get in. The piece that had nothing to do with Tampa Bay got in. So I was really proud because that show, many of you know of Jean Dunwall, and she and I were the 2 non-weavers who were in this big yardage show that was over at the Tampa Convention Center. So that was 2000, they were done in 2007, and this was just the beginning of 2008. not going chronologically. A group of us got together after someone went and took a workshop with Jane Dunwald in San Antonio, and they said, let's get together and do art cloth exercises from the back of her books. And I'd had her book for years and never looked and knew that there were exercises at the back. So we got a group together, and we're working in a ladies' studio, and we started doing these things. And I was challenging myself because I was making myself do all the steps in an exercise. And there were many people in the group who would do A and B, maybe make it to C, and then say, oh, well, you know, I usually do this. And I was trying to make myself do things that I was not liking, just to push myself. So this was me pushing myself using stamps and stencils, and I was not really liking it, but it was okay for, you know, the idea of art cloth is building up layers of information. And someone walked up and said, oh, I see great roses in your work. Well, I have this problem. Our house in Connecticut, the master bedroom had 12 or 13 or 14 layers of rose wallpaper. We had small roses, we had medium sized, we had big roses, we had pink roses, we had red roses, we had, and taking off all those layers of wallpaper, I said, you know, I hate roses. So immediately, I abandoned everything else and started doing spirals to try to change it so it didn't look like roses. And so this has silkscreen spirals in it, it has foiled spirals in it, and it has this tulle spiral in it. And if I had planned, you know, serendipity in your work, after I put the tulle on, I realized that it almost looked to me like these little foil ones were being generated and being spit out by the tulle. So I could have placed them better if I had that thought ahead of time. But I'm like Bonnie, it's, and thank you for talking about that so much, because that's the way I approach things. I'll have an idea, and then it's a matter of, how are you going to solve that problem? And I know so many techniques, there's many I don't know, but and I know enough that it can be difficult to say, you know, which technique would respond best to whatever I'm trying to do. This piece is another piece of art cloth, and again, umpteen layers, shibori, silkscreen, and this particular shape of silkscreen to me looked like Ling, and it looked happy. And I put a whole bunch of Japanese leaves in here, ginkgo and red maple and paulownia. You can see a green and the orange. And so that piece is titled The Winds of Happiness. I've always thought of that as a very happy piece. This is the most recent piece done. You know when you wake up in the morning and sometimes in that first spot where you're not really awake yet, but you're not really asleep, and you get I get an image. And it was this really strong image of a white circle in a red ground, and then as I was waking up, the red ground suddenly had blue lines across it. So that said Shibori to me. Inajime Shibori is when you take cloth and you fold it, and then you clamp it between paired pieces of wood. So if you're having cloth folded up, and you're placing a circle on the top and a circle on the bottom, before you clamp it, you're sitting there. When my husband was alive, he said, what are you doing? Because I would be staring into space like this, because you're trying to focus and feel, are they lined up? Because the resist you're going to get, if they're lined up, you're going to get the print, the resist that you wanted. If it's like this, the parts you're going to get resisted is where they're clamped across each other, but you're not going to get the fingertips. So this was a piece of white cloth, inajime, folded and clamped, dyed red. Then I took it and made a seam so that it was a cylinder. So you have this cylinder of cloth that came down over a piece of PVC pipe, and as you're scrunching it down, the parts that are tight against the PVC don't take dye, they're resisting. And the parts that are sticking out, the edges take the dye. And so if you're doing Murakumo is when you are using the cylinder. And so as you're scrunching it down, if you rotate it, as you're scrunching it, you're getting these lovely diagonal lines. And I once did a piece where I scrunched to the right, and then after a few inches I scrunched to the left, and after a few more inches I was scrunched to the right again, and it was great. So you can have so much fun scrunching. And the thing about Shibori that Wayani was saying is I've been doing Shibori for 25 years, almost 30 years. And you know you've done something like this so many times. You know what you want. And when you open it up, you don't know for sure what you're going to get.
It's something wonderful. It is.
It's serendipity. You just don't know for sure.